Hey, welcome to the channel. I'm Chris. Super happy to see you here. Snowflake just crashed. It's down 16% and I just bought the stock. Let me explain. So on Thursday, Snowflake reported its first quarterly results of the year. The stock crashed, but I gotta tell you before we get into anything, the results actually were good. The problem is that Snowflake didn't jump onto the AI hype and the stock got punished. So Snowflake is keeping it real, and I do appreciate that. I don't mind the stock coming down 16%, but they didn't mention the word AI for 20 times in their report, so investors didn't like it. Anyways, I'm not here to bitch around, so let's just jump into the numbers. Let's jump into the report and see what we can learn. So we see that their Q1 financial highlights have done pretty well. In fact, we see that product revenue growth year over year came in at 50%. 50%, fantastic number. It's a little bit slower than it used to be, but I gotta tell you, 50% growth year over year is still very, very strong. We also see that their net retention rate came in at 151%. And that's the first little bummer that some investors had, because traditionally the net revenue retention rate was a little bit higher. We can see here as example, again, the net retention rate, it used to be in the 170s around there. And since the Q1 of 2023, that has been coming down a little bit. And we're talking about 151%. And to be honest, I think to punish a stock based on that is a little bit unfair, because 151 revenue retention rate is extremely good, right? 170 obviously is better, but we're talking 151%. It's fantastic, right? So I don't think it's justified to see that as something negative for Snowflake. Then we also see that the large customers, so customers that are spending more than $1 million per year, also increased to 373 customers. So that's really good, because that means that bigger companies, more important companies, are getting more interested in Snowflake because they can actually help them with their business. And if we look into some companies that are actually working with Snowflake together, we see there's some pretty good names in there. So we got a lot of financial service companies in there. Capital One, right? Western Union, BlackRock even is working with them. AXA, the insurance company, right? Adobe is in there. HubSpot, obviously a big one. EA, so the games company, right? Warner Bros. Music is in there. And also the Swiss pharma conglomerate Novartis. So really important customer, big customers. And it's quite something to show for, in my opinion. And we see that, those large customer, Forbes Global 2000 customers, so good customers, are really continuously increasing also. And, that's really what I like to see about Snowflake. They can prove that they're worth the money. That's why more and more companies get onto Snowflake. Then jumping back into the financial highlights, we can see also that gross margins, even though it's on a non-GAAP basis, is 77%. And 77% of gross margin is very nice to see. It's fantastic. Most software companies have high margins. We can see that with Palantir as example as well, right? Adobe and so on. They have very high gross margins. But 77%, it's outstanding. The problem that I see with gross margins always is that so gross margins are revenue minus cost of revenue, right? So after that, there are still a lot of expenses. So even though Snowflake has very high gross margins, at the end on their net margins, they're still unprofitable. And that's mainly because they still have a lot of costs after that. So looking into those costs, we see that as a percentage of revenue, we see that we still have 40% of sales and marketing costs. And that's, a tragedy, because that means that from $1 earned, 40 cents of Snowflake's money is going back to sales and marketing. And I don't enjoy to see that. I think I would wish that over time that number would come down, because if you have to spend that much money on sales and marketing, it's not really a good thing for you, right? Now, obviously, Snowflake is still in the growth phase, so I do understand that, but I do wish to see that number coming down, because 40%, that's a lot. Then we also see that 21% goes into research and development. Here, on the other hand, I do enjoy to see those 21%. I don't have a problem with it because it means that Snowflake is still continuing to be innovative. They're still coming up with new products. They're working on themselves and so on. So absolutely no problem here, right? And then they also got an additional 8% that's going into general and administrative costs, right? So obviously every company has that, but we can see in total, if we take out all those costs, Snowflake on a net basis is still unprofitable. And sadly, they're unprofitable on quite a big margin. So we see their GAAP net income is actually at negative 225 million per quarter. So that ends up to about $1 billion per year, which is a lot of money, right? We're talking a company that's making 2 billion in revenue roughly. So $1 billion in a net loss is a lot, right? And they have to kind of find a way to get out of that unprofitability. They kind of have to find a way to scale up to become more profitable. Now, I gotta be fair, from their financials, there are also some very good points. And that's why also I bought the company, because we can see, as example, their free cash flow, right, is actually growing quite rapidly. We see that in the last few quarters, we were hovering somewhere in the, 50, 60 million US dollars per quarter in free cash flow. And that has really drastically scaled up now to roughly around 280 million US dollars in free cash flow. And if you watch the channel, if you follow the channel, you know that I love to invest in companies that have free cash flow, right? I think it's a very important measure. It's just as important as net income on a GAAP basis, right? Because we can see how much cash actually is going through the business, hard cash, right? And a lot of non-cash charges are taken out from the free cash flow, right? So that's really good. I do like that because it gives a more realistic picture of what the company is actually doing. By the way, if you enjoyed the video so far, don't forget to smack that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. So as a quick recap, yes, there are some issues with Snowflake. Their net retention rate is going down, even though it's still fantastic. We see that also they're having a problem still with unprofitability and so on, right? But they definitely also have their upsides. And to whatever people say, Snowflake is still growing extremely fast. We see that year over year, the company is still growing at 70%. So it's almost a double, 1.2 billion to 2 billion, right? And year over year on a quarterly basis, we also see we still got, roughly around 50% growth in there. So the company is still scaling up. It's still growing. That whole story of, Snowflake not going anywhere anymore and that's the end of growth, it's just simply not true. The company's still doing good. I mean, those are cold, hard numbers, right? There's not much to argue with that. And I do think that the potential upsides, especially at the prices where Snowflake is trading at the moment, it's roughly trading at 144 US dollars at the moment. So we're talking a market cap of somewhere around 45 billion, roughly in that area. The company is still expensive, yes, it's true, but I think it's reasonable with the growth that they're still having. And it has come down substantially from its peak. So if you're investing now in Snowflake, your margin of safety is much, much greater than it was, 2 years ago. And that's why I got interested in Snowflake. That's why I got into Snowflake. And I think over the long term, probably the company will be doing well. I don't see Snowflake going, bust anytime soon. Also, if we look into their balance sheet, they almost have no debt. They still got a good amount of cash laying around. I think they got a few billion US dollars in short-term investments and in cash laying around with almost no debt. So the risks of Snowflake going bust or something is fairly small in my opinion. But I'm not recommending you to buy the stock. Do your own due diligence. I'm just trying to help you show the numbers here, right? And give my personal opinion to it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, smash that like button, comment on the bottom if you have any questions or any video suggestions for me. And then I hope you enjoyed it and see you back soon.